Hi, I have recently had some requests that I read my series, my latest blog series on discomfort. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. There's 3 parts to it, and I'll just be reading from the blog. And that way you can just sit back, you can hear it, you can receive the words. I know sometimes it's just not in our brain bandwidth to be reading all the time. So I hope this is useful for some of you. The first one back in August was titled Befriending Discomfort so that we can know love. There's something huge going on right now that's freaking people out around the globe within almost every person, discomfort. Whether it's COVID-19 or the Great Awakening with regards to racism or something in between, this is a time of uncertainty, and for most humans that ushers in dis-ease, restlessness, anxiety, discomfort. If we could clean up our relationship with discomfort, the world would be a lot different. Yes, the world, really. And yeah, it's not that easy, I know. Discomfort and I were enemies most of my life. I did everything I could to negotiate with discomfort. I maneuvered, I manipulated, and managed life in every way I could. So much that I became an expert at avoiding discomfort. On levels I was not aware of, I thought discomfort, 1, defined who I was as a person, and 2, would kill me if I felt it. Hidden within both 1 and 2 was a rather significant belief. If I'm feeling discomfort, it's because I'm doing something wrong. Or worse yet, if I'm feeling discomfort, it's because I am wrong, or a derivative, bad, for example. This belief is a pretty limiting belief, yeah? It is a belief that promises pretty much only one thing, a life of suffering. There's no way around it. If one believes that discomfort equals wrongness, or any derivative, there's going to be suffering eventually. I tried to hold off eventually for as long as I could. To avoid it, I spent my life trying to control, fix, adapt, manage, figure out. And when that didn't work, or exhausted and overwhelmed me, I rotated between being numb, dissociated, and disembodied. Survival strategy, going mental. Why would I choose such a belief if it's guaranteed to bring me suffering? Why would anyone? Well, no one would choose it. But life experiences and various contexts will innocently lead us to this belief. For example, if we're in a family of origin that does not talk about feelings and sensations and how to be with them, or if we're in a family of origin where the adults are causing us harm, or if we're in a family of origin where our siblings or other young people are harming us, and the adults in our lives aren't helping us, or there are countless possibilities. As a young being, we will experience shock when we are harmed or disconnected from a sense of our safety, from a sense of our sources of safety. Without guidance, without people to safely reconnect with us, and without nurturing instruction, we will quickly become overwhelmed, and then we will innocently turn against ourselves. We won't be aware of it at the time, but we will subconsciously blame ourselves. We're literally at the mercy of adults in our lives as young people, so we need them to be good in our eyes. It's not safe to blame the adults, so we blame ourselves. We will assume it's us, and then we'll try to figure out how to please our caregivers, figure out who they want us to be. We'll try to manage the situation and our own behavior. We'll even try to control what's happening, control our caregivers and ourselves through our behavior, or fix what we think is wrong. We just keep adapting to their wants, their needs, while losing contact with our own. And thinking that it's our fault, in an attempt to figure out how to get out of such a predicament, we will disconnect from our bodies because it's too overwhelming to be with what we're feeling without support. Instead, we'll turn to our heads to help us manage, fix, figure out, fantasize, and or control. We literally go mental in an attempt to feel better, to feel connected, to feel whole. Until we learn how to safely include our bodies, we will live the rest of our lives from this very mental-oriented strategy adaptation. A friend of mine created this flow chart to describe the mostly subconscious, until recently, process that she has been reliving over and over throughout her life. It starts with discomfort, and then in comes the belief I'm doing something wrong or I'm wrong. And then in comes I've got to figure out, manage, control, fix, adapt. Then comes overwhelm and exhaustion under the weight of that. And then in comes the numbing, dissociating, disembodying. And then more discomfort because it's not sustained to stay in those states. And the cycle just rotates, it keeps going, it keeps feeding itself. This cycle is 100% normal in our culture. Normal. I've not met a person that hasn't done this in one way or another. Some people unconsciously live their whole lives from this disembodied place so as to avoid what they innocently fear, discomfort. They don't know from lived experience that discomfort is normal and actually a necessary aspect of evolvement, and instead they conflate it with a personal lack, an I am wrongness, or danger. Befriending discomfort so that we can know love. So here we are, and I'm noticing something interesting. As I've been journeying with so many during this time of COVID-19, which then flowed into a worldwide awakening from the naming of systemic racism, I notice the most resilient people are those who have made friends or reconnected with not just their bodies, but also discomfort. For various reasons, some of us have learned, by choice or by circumstance, how to be in our bodies while there's discomfort. Others of us have not been given the opportunity to learn this, or we're very slowly learning this with the support of experienced practitioners. This territory will feel extremely counterintuitive for most, so it is a journey, a learning that will create a life anew for us. I'm going to write a series of posts about this curtailing, how and why this is particularly relevant now, the importance and necessity of befriending discomfort, how this is linked to racism and COVID-19 and white supremacy, how this is related to waking up, love, and unity consciousness, how this is connected with self-love, trust, and a life of well-being, and how to unweave and unlearn the belief that discomfort is bad and dangerous. In other words, how to put a cog in the wheel of oppression, of our internalized oppression. Yes, it's all related. If you've read my past posts about awakening over the years, you might already get a sense of how it's related. The giveaway, in order to open our hearts and reside in love, in order to be truly as unity consciousness, in order to sincerely be in well-being, one must have an inner resilience to be able to feel all that comes with such territory. The territory of our humanity is wide, expansive, and deep. Befriending one's body, reconnecting with one's body, and discomfort is key if one is wanting to be with this territory. This is not easy territory. It requires us to be well acquainted with the depths of compassion and presence, the somatics of trust and allowance, and the wisdom of love. I'll be moving into more context in the next piece in this series. There are some footnotes to that that you can check in with that in that blog. Befriending discomfort. The second one is called Feeling Exhausted, and this came out on September 20th. Is posted to my blog on September 20th. Here's a second piece in a series of blog posts exploring discomfort and disconnection. I've been noticing in clients, in myself, and perhaps everywhere, tension and discomfort goes up when a sense of connection to well-being goes down. It's not the tension or the push-pull that's the problem. In fact, tension is a normal part of the human experience. It's the constant lack of well-being amidst the tension. Could you imagine us being a culture that communicated from kindness, that operated from a sense of we-ness, that was rooted in curiosity? Even amidst tension, we could be in connection, supporting one another. But we are a culture rooted in dominant, oppressive narrative, behaviors, and mores, a culture that's rooted in disconnection. And so, along with tension, we also feel disconnect, and that changes everything. When I think of tension, I think of a push-pull. There's something pushing and another thing pulling, and this creates a tension. We may have literally experienced this in our families of origin, where we perhaps found ourselves in between our mothers and fathers, or was, in my case, between my mother and my brother. We have experienced this in our circles of friends, or in other kinds of engagements where, for example, there is a sense of pressure to be a certain way. We may have experienced this from a group of people or from culture itself, particularly if we are from a marginalized population, marginalized as deemed by this culture in which we live. We don't often have good skills to navigate these tensions, and we often aren't with others who have these skills either, who can support us. Survivors know this territory well, on a variety of levels. Instead of being raised with loving and kind voices and a compassionate culture, we are often raised with external narratives filled with supposed tos and shoulds, as well as other judgments, and sometimes even hatred. We tried so hard to be good, but we got treated the way we were being treated. It hurts to be rejected, to be excluded, to be othered, to be harmed, to be left out, to not belong. We so desperately want to be accepted by others, included by others, valued by others, loved, and it can be devastating when we are not. We try so hard to get that approval so that we can belong. Over time, we innocently internalize those external judgmental narratives, and they become our own narratives. In the process, we begin to turn ourselves into pretzels, fighting with ourselves to be a certain way, still trying to get that approval, to get that belonging. We can literally feel this push-pull in our bodies when we are involved in conflict with ourselves or with others. One part of ourselves may be pushing one way, and another part may be pulling in another way. It can show up differently for each person based on the context. I often experience it in my solar plexus, but it has showed up in my throat, my heart, my lower belly, and other areas of my body. It's usually very uncomfortable and can create distress in our bodies. You might think of a time when you weren't sure what to do. You wanted to do X, but you also wanted to do Y. Maybe it was your belly in that push-pull, and it felt like there was a knot in there. Maybe it was your heart with a clenching. Maybe it was your throat with a tightening. Or maybe there was overwhelm and a sense of numbness came over you. Not knowing how to navigate the discomfort in our bodies, this push-pull, often takes us to our minds where an internal sense of fighting comes alive, of fighting and a franticness in our thoughts, as we're convinced that we will be able to figure it out from our thoughts, from our minds. Feeling exhausted? All that pretzel making is such burdened hard work. In an innocent attempt to feel safe, we turn to fighting with ourselves through our thoughts. We so badly want this discomfort to end, and we will attempt to rely on our thoughts to do it. The unconscious internal narratives may look like, if I do X, things will calm down. If I do Y, they'll stop yelling at each other. If I do Z, this knot in my belly will go away. If I'm XYZ, I'll be included. The thoughts can morph into, I should be better than I am. I should be like I was when XYZ. I should be like XYZ person. I'm supposed to be XYZ, not as I am. The variations are endless. Hidden within all these unconscious narratives are shoulds and supposed tos and have tos that we hope and believe will lead us to safety and relief. Whew! Is it any wonder why we experience so much anxiety and why we're so exhausted? The frenetic state of being is perhaps the biggest clue that we are out of well-being and that we need to get some clarity. We know that our revved up thoughts are not helping, and so we must slow down and pause. As we do so, we will be able to step back from our franticness of our minds and start to get conscious with the subconsciousness of our thoughts by simply asking ourselves, what thoughts am I having right now about XYZ or myself? Having a healthy relationship with our somatic presence is an important part of this process. There are simple practices to develop this relationship midway through this blog post, and then I link a blog post. Shifting into well-being. While this slowing down and becoming familiar with our thoughts is a necessary part of shifting patterns, we may not first appreciate what we find. For example, we may have considered ourselves to be a rather peaceful person, only to discover this inward fighting and conflict going on. Discovering what had been out of my attention has often been difficult for me. It may bump up a kind of arrogance I have had about who I am or my place in the world even. Said another way, it often didn't feel good to my personality to realize how many blind spots I had about myself. Shame and humiliation often surfaced first. After the sting wore off, usually with the help of some loving people in my life, I moved from humiliation to humility, where I could wake more fully to the learning part of being human. Once I remember that I am human, a human here to learn, I find the discovery aspect of my human journey less threatening, and slowly I become more grateful for the opportunity to unlearn the innocent yet harmful patterning. I didn't have support to help me be aware of my subconscious narratives early in my journey, and so it took me a long time to learn that often it wasn't others who were harming me anymore. Over and over, I thought it was other people. To clarify, yes, people had harmed me tremendously in my past, particularly when I was a child. I had minimal sense of autonomy or ability to choose with regard to my predicament as a child. As I matured and was able to make choices for myself, those internalized oppressive narratives followed me, and over time I realized that as an adult, no one was harming me as much as I was harming me through the subconscious mental fights going on in my mind in an attempt to stay safe, to feel safe. When we argue with who we are, when we argue with who we are, and when we are constantly comparing ourselves to others or our imagined self, it is we who are rejecting ourselves. We who are berating ourselves, othering ourselves, excluding ourselves. What once began as others not being loving toward us and others rejecting and judging us becomes us not loving ourselves, us rejecting ourselves and judging ourselves. It becomes us who abandon our very self. Spotting that internal fight rather than focusing on the external fight can be a first step in putting a cog in the wheel of self-violation. It can be a huge step in moving toward empowerment because while we can't control how others respond to us, we can slowly over time learn how to be kind and loving and accepting of ourselves. And for the record, self-compassion is something I had to learn as an adult because it was never role modeled to me as a child or even into my 20s, despite years in a spiritual community. Loosening the grip of oppression. Naming this happening may seem like no big deal, but naming is one of the most important components of shifting a habitual pattern. A pattern runs at its strongest when it happens without consciousness. As soon as it becomes conscious, it immediately starts to lose power, and it will lose more power if there is less judgment associated with the naming. In other words, if I beat myself up for being conscious of the pattern, it will hold in place. But if, upon recognizing I participated in this pattern innocently, I can factually say to myself, oh, I just did that. Okay, I can see how that is the pattern of X. That simple awareness will start to shift the pattern. This is where getting support was helpful for me in shifting the patterning, as I did not know how to treat myself with patience or kindness until it was modeled to me through somatic practitioners trained in trauma healing. Once you're able to name the patterning without judgment, you might start to notice it move. As kindly and compassionately as you can, keep naming the pattern as it arises, without trying to fix or change it. The kindness and compassion itself can be profound in shifting the pattern. I found journaling useful in addition to exploring with supportive practitioners and friends. Although it may take time, all of this plays a role in shifting the oppressive tendencies we have with regard to how we treat ourselves as well as others. Keep exploring and let me know what questions arise for you as you get to know yourself. I have another footnote where I talk about how to learn more about the dominant narrative, where I've written a lot. And I also have a note in there that I'll be facilitating a 10-month exploration in January of 2021, where together we will learn how to befriend ourselves and our experiences, as well as extend that knowing in our work with others. And if you're interested in that, please do email me. The last piece, moving through discomfort. In the first piece on discomfort, I wrote about how we often unintentionally conflate discomfort with wrongness and the importance and significance of befriending our discomfort. In the second piece, I explore the topic of internalized oppression, which includes living from our internal narratives of shoulds, supposed tos, and so on, which create a push-pull fighting dynamic inside ourselves. In this piece, I'm going to share an experience which will reveal a little bit about how these two are related as an entryway into diving deeper into the topic. A couple months ago, right around the time I was starting to write more on discomfort, I had an experience that I started to share with clients to illustrate how quickly the mind can jump in when discomfort happens. I was in a meeting with a group of people. Some were familiar to me and some unfamiliar. We were all sharing our reflections, where we saw the organization in this present time in relation to our group's particular focus. The focus was not race, but race was on my mind. I had been struggling with this organization the last month in particular after hearing firsthand about some overt and covert racism that had been happening in the organization. I felt compelled to share my thoughts. Actually, if I was to continue to be part of this community, I found it necessary to share my thoughts. I verbally shared with love in my heart and presence in my being. And yet, right after sharing, I could feel a deep throb in the area of my solar plexus. It was loudly uncomfortable. I was somewhat surprised that I was having this physiological response, and in the span of a few short seconds, I noticed narratives checking in to see if I'd said anything out of integrity or anything wrong. Since I had been studying discomfort, particularly the conflation of discomfort with wrongness, I very quickly saw through what was occurring. Here was a lived example where discomfort came, and in a split second, my narrative was assuming I might have done something wrong, and that I'd be rejected for doing so. I'm lucky to have this awareness. I immediately had a short conversation with myself. This is just discomfort. It doesn't mean I've done anything wrong. This is just discomfort. I am in no danger. I consciously acknowledged I was safe and that I was having a body response to saying hard things, but that I was indeed in integrity. I brought conscious attention to my bones, to my breath, and to my being, and slowed down to rest with all that had arisen. About a minute later, the wave had shifted. I'm sharing this to show how common and how normal it is to conflate untruths of our experience, as well as how quickly these thoughts can surface, as well as how quickly they can subside. I will not write extensively on this today, but the topic of oppression ties in this as well. In fact, it is very related. Had I not had the self-awareness, I would have very much moved into an oppressive battle with myself, which could have very quickly led to becoming passive to the real-life oppression that's existing in the world within this organization. Speaking out against externalized oppression may not be easy for us. It may very well bring discomfort. If we think this discomfort means that we're not safe, and or if we think this discomfort means we're doing something wrong, and or if we think this discomfort means we should stay or be silent, not only will we be enabling the dissonance in our minds, we will be supporting the structures of oppression and culture. Befriending my discomfort does not make life more fulfilling for myself. Befriending my discomfort does not just make life more fulfilling for myself. It allows me to speak up and disrupt oppression that's happening around me. It allows me to say hard things to people one-to-one. It allows me to say hard things in groups or organizational settings. And it allows me to write things that some people will find challenging. I might even say that befriending discomfort is the key in evolving. Some things which can help us befriend discomfort will sound counterintuitive at first. Perhaps befriending discomfort already sounds counterintuitive enough. It is by getting closer to that which we don't like that we can learn about it. If you would like to develop a healthier relationship with discomfort, I invite you to explore the diagram from the first blog post. Discomfort, which leads to a belief of I'm doing something wrong, which leads to a mentaling of I've got to figure something out, manage, control, fix, which can lead to an overwhelm or exhaustion, which can lead to a numbing, dissociative, disembodying, and more discomfort. Do you see this pattern in your own life? Developing self-awareness takes time, but it is crucial if we want to develop different ways of being in the world. Slowing down, which is also hard and can be seen as counterintuitive, so that we can become more intimate with ourselves, can be profound. Be curious of your relationship with your inner narratives and their relationship to discomfort, and please let me know what you discover. I also link to a number of blog posts that help to slow down, to help us to connect with how slowing down can affect our life in profound ways. And lastly, again, at the end of this blog post, I acknowledge that I'll be facilitating a 10-month exploration in January 2021, where we will learn how to befriend ourselves and our experiences, as well as extend that knowing to our work with others. So I hope that reading these blog posts has been useful for you. If you have questions, please do email me, LLMEUS as in Sam, ER at me.com. And I'd love to hear from you. If you're interested in my course starting in 2021 in January, please email me about that. If there's anything that you'd like me to write about that I haven't, or do a YouTube about, please do reach out and I'll see what I can do. Thanks very much.